world, hello internet, and a warm welcome to those of you who are interested in Prime Ministers and Cabinet. If you're not interested in Prime Ministers and Cabinet, then don't go away. There may still yet be something here that you find interesting. But let's talk a little bit about what we've got to cover. We've got a lot of stuff to cover, and there's no way I'm going to do it in one batch of 15 minutes or in two batches of 15 minutes. The chances are this is going to take me 3 batches of 15 minutes, and within that there's going to be some repetition and overlap. And if you've got a problem with that, well, you know, other websites are available. Okay, let's push on. We're going to push on. We're going to start straight away where we left off, talking about the civil service and the ministers and the way in which one of these is permanent, that is, they don't change, and the other is political, which is they do change with every election and sometimes between elections. So the ministers are going to be the focus of this particular thing. We're looking at the ministers who come and go like yesterday's snow. But we start off. Here is government. Government doesn't actually change. Government is there. It just has different people running it. And currently, Brenda has asked Dave if he would form a government. Now, he needs to form that government. He can't run a government by himself, and he's going to need his mates to help him. And so here we've got some of his mates. We've got 26 or so of his closest and dearest political chums and allies. Now, they're not doing it by themselves. Let's say there's 26 of them. There's another 90-odd junior ministers filling up the other ranks of the ministerial pyramid. Remember, you've got your secretaries of state, then your junior ministers, then your parliamentary secretaries, all of which add up to just under 100. So there's just less than 100, just under 100 ministers in government, all of whom are bound by collective ministerial responsibility. Good. Questions on that? You know where to find me. That's a big slide just in itself. This is the slide that really annoys me because I can't get it to work properly. We have appointments, they come, they go. But the big offices of state, these are the monstrous offices of state. These are the administrative units that get things done. They stay. We just have different people being appointed by the Prime Minister to fill these particular jobs. Currently, as I said, they are, that's pretty much in date. Okay, that's good. I can live with that. Right, so the rules of cabinet government is very, very simple. There are only 3 rules. Rule number 1, Prime Minister, primus inter pares, which of course means first among equals. Now, if you don't know what that means, you have my sympathy because I don't know what it means either. In fact, as far as I can say, it doesn't make any sense at all. And this is a bit of a problem. What it means is that slap bang in the middle of the British administration, there is something that simply doesn't make sense. In fact, it's an oxymoron. You can't be first among equals. It's inconsistent. But the problem is that this means there's no set pattern to the way in which the Prime Minister conducts himself vis-a-vis Cabinet. And so this one particular system or model can accommodate a whole range of different possibilities. And that's one of the reasons where students get really tangled up. They say, well, how can you have one system that accommodates at one end of the scale the Blair Brown beast with the John Major beast at the other? Well, because of primus inter pares, it is flexible. However, that brings us to the idea of the elastic theory, which is something we're going to be talking about a lot as time goes on. This is a flexible model, but it's not infinitely flexible. You can stretch it to a certain point, but the chances are that it will snap back at you at the time that you least expect and at a time that is monumentally inconvenient. Not that an elastic band slapping back at any time is convenient, unless, of course, I suppose you're trying to fire something out of it. But now I'm getting distracted. What are the other rules of cabinet government? I hear you say, well, here they come. The first is collective responsibility, and that means deciding what should be done together. Everybody in cabinet makes a decision, and then that is binding on everybody in cabinet and indeed on everybody else in government. So cabinet decisions are collective. Then there is individual responsibility, which means this may be a collective decision, but if you screw that up, then that's your fault. So here we have cabinet making the decision collectively and handing it on to the individual to manage it. So this is the difference between executive roles and administrative roles. So we have the executive decision-making here, the decision-making, and the administrative doing it here. And again, this is the dual role of cabinet in the UK, in deciding what should be done and then getting that done. So executive and administration in one body, once again, just like the civil service. Primus inter pares theory, membership and agenda. This is really what it comes down to. What can the Prime Minister do? Now, I am not going to talk about the royal prerogative here because the royal prerogative does not really attend to the Prime Minister. It attends to government in general. Certain roles attending closer to certain individuals than others, but the royal prerogative technically attends to government. And if you've got a problem with that, look at the website, look at the government website. It makes it very, very clear that ministers don't really hold the royal prerogative powers in their own hands, but rather as being part of government. So what does primus inter pares mean? Whoops, that's gone wrong. It means you get to appoint members, but I don't want to start there. When it comes to the membership of cabinet, cabinet is essentially a balancing act. You have to balance the cabinet you want with the party your party wants. With the cabinet, sorry, your party wants. Now, don't forget, the party won the election. It was the party that won the election. And so you are the leader of that party, but the party will have expectations about how this cabinet is going to look. And if you, as Prime Minister, ignore those, well, that's a very courageous decision because your power base, as we will discover, your power base shifts. You have no clear power base. Remember, the Prime Minister has no direct mandate. All of his authority is derived. And that is extremely important. The Prime Minister forgets that at their peril. Anyway, you do get to appoint your members, and that means, by and large, keeping your friends close and your enemies closer. And we'll talk about that in a coming slide. It also means you get to decide roles, and there's a clear hierarchy of roles in government with sort of the exchequer at one end all the way down, presumably to Northern Ireland, which frankly is the one nobody really wants. So there is that hierarchy, and there's a fantastic gag in Yes, Prime Minister, which you probably won't understand because you've never heard of Yes, Prime Minister, all to do with Northern Ireland. But anyway, I'll waive that for the time being. Well, Northern Ireland, by the way, lovely place. Many of my friends are Irish, etc., etc., etc. I see what's happened here actually. Agenda, you decide what to discuss, but what this really means is that you're deciding what the country is going to do. Remember, the government has policy sovereignty, and setting national policy is the job of cabinet. So deciding the agenda is the Prime Minister's role. He decides what is discussed at cabinet and where it is discussed. Now, this is really important. It may seem kind of obscure, but what we come to find is that this really becomes the absolutely critical issue. Where is policy discussed? Perhaps more importantly, where are decisions made? But I bang on about that relentlessly in a subsequent slide, so I'll be quiet about it right now. Let's talk a little bit about that picking sides, keeping your friends close and your enemies closer. It's about rewarding support, and a great example here from the Blair administration, and you can go and look this up. In terms of the Blair business, look up Charlie Faulkner and Derry Irving, and you'll be pretty surprised about what you see there, I promise you. So Derry Irving and Charlie Faulkner in the Blair administration. This encourages ideological consistency. That's probably a good thing. It makes your position slightly stronger, and of course, it's a way of nurturing talent. If we're going to look at this in the case of the current Cameron administration, we'd be looking here at the likes of Osborne, of course, Gove, which may surprise you, and perhaps the single most important person in the cabinet, the one of which you've never heard, Oliver Letwin, also known as Cameron's brain. In terms of encouraging ideological consistency, well, these guys are certainly all on the same page, and he is the doyen of conservative ideology at the minute. In terms of nurturing talent, when you can look at the way in which Priti Patel has been appointed, she seems to be going places, and Sajiv, Sajiv Miandar, I want to say Sajiv Miandar, he's a cricketer. We'll talk about it in class. But going back into the Blair administration, there were some real youngsters who came through there, including, I think, one in particular called James Parnell, who was extremely young, very, very ambitious, and is now running the BBC. So if you look at James Parnell's Blair trajectory, you'll get a good idea of what I mean by nurturing talent. In terms of keeping your enemies closer, well, you keep an eye on them. Now, in this sense, I'm going to target Theresa May. Now, it's not that she's an enemy as such, but she is not on the same ideological page as these guys. And in terms of being a rival, she is certainly a rival for this guy, because they're obviously going to be fighting over the leadership when that time comes. Tie them up with collective responsibility. The last thing you want is a loose cannon. Oh, I don't know. Can I think of a loose cannon at the minute? Someone who's liable to go off the rails at any given minute and say something stupid. Well, if he's bound by collective responsibility, he can't do that. And we can certainly see the converse of that when David Davis starts spouting out about any sort of policy that happens to come along that he disagrees with. David Davis, by the way, was once a candidate for premiership within the Conservative government. He's now on the backbenches, and he loves nothing more than lobbing out the odd hand grenade. Keep them off the backbenches. Well, again, there's David Davis proving what you can do from the backbenches. So these two are very closely tied up. But again, somebody else who they don't really want on the backbenches, because I think he knows where all the bodies are buried, is Ian Duncan Smith. The quiet man, perhaps. I suspect that when he gets onto the quiet, when he finds himself on the backbenches, he may have a few scores to settle with this man. But we'll worry about that when he gets there. So, primus inter pares in real life, it's all about personality and circumstances. Are you psychologically equipped to dominate cabinet? And here's the thing, I don't really think that Cameron is. I think he's fundamentally lazy. That fruit ninja won't play itself. So I don't think he really is. Same with Blair. Blair wanted to do this and he wasn't going to do it any other way. Thatcher similarly, whereas Major was a very, very different kettle of fish entirely. And of course that ties up with the psychologically inclined. So you've got very, very different case studies all the way across that. Perhaps the most psychologically equipped, interesting one is Brown, who once upon a time may have been psychologically equipped to run a much more centred, focused administration, but the time he spent seething meant that by the time he did get into office, he just simply couldn't do it. And again, I urge those of you who are interested to read Rawnsley's Servants of the People. It's a brilliant, brilliant book all about the Blair administration, Blair Brown administration. People, and replete with examples and lots of swearing. Circumstances, what previously happened, if you're coming off the back of a very dictatorial prime minister, for example, the Thatcher to Major transition or the Blair to Brown transition, then it's going to be much, much harder to dominate things. And also what's happening now, if you're in the middle of a crisis situation, as Blair was, having engineered one, obviously it's much more efficacious to operate a much more focused and controlled administration. Collective responsibility, where we talked about that, this is that all decisions of government are binding on all government members, and government has collective authority from Parliament. So we have here free discussion, but no comebacks after that decision. Unity is, of course, strength. The more united a cabinet is, the stronger it's going to be. Individual, however, comes down to administration. So again, this is decisions, whereas this is admin, and also keeping it in your trousers, if I may be crude. The buck stops with the ministers. So ministers are responsible for the actions of their department. They're also accountable for the way in which the the departmental decisions are implemented. Now that's important. So the way the department makes decisions and the way in which the departmental decisions are implemented, both of those are the responsibility of the ministers, and ministers are indeed responsible for their own conduct. So yeah, behave. Here are some examples of people behaving and not behaving. Very, very simple. I'm not going to go through all of these because I've only got about a minute left. But perhaps what's really interesting is this slide. Not evidence. The problem with collective responsibility and individual responsibility is that no one knows the limits. No one knows how far you can push it. So, and that's another problem with our constitution. It's all just a bit vague. And so sometimes ministers resign when they shouldn't. Sometimes ministers stay when they shouldn't. And I've got different styles of government in 14 minutes and 35 seconds. I'll see you in the next presentation. I hope you like that. Come to me with your questions and I'll speak to you then. Bye now.